What's up, you guys? This is Odyssey of Odyssey Eurobeat, and welcome to today's episode of Budget Controllerism. Today, I'm going to give you guys a list of affordable controller options, including some you might not have known you had. Before I begin, I want to cover some ground rules, some sort of basic level stuff. First off, these are going to be cheap controllers, fairly cheap. They're not going to be super flashy. They're not going to be all this lights and explosions and all this crazy stuff, just enough to get you up off the ground and playing a little bit. Second off, this is not going to be a very exhaustive list by any means. There's going to be some other version by another manufacturer, and if you like that one more, if that one's cheaper, go ahead, go for that one. I honestly don't know the brands well enough to say, oh, that one's crap, that one's great. These are just options that I found that are relatively affordable and get the job done, with a good balance of buttons to knobs, usually favoring buttons. I'm also a little flexible as to what I consider a button, and I'll delve into that a little bit towards the end of the video. I'm also not including a lot that have like a built-in turntable setup or a dedicated crossfader. Those are fine, but that's more DJ approaching, which is absolutely fine. But what I'm going for here is a bit more of a button, knob, slider approach. If you want to learn how to DJ, there are, frankly, better tutorials for that. This is just so you can hit a couple buttons and turn a couple knobs and get the job done. I think that's everything. Let's begin. Akai has some lovely controllers if you know what to look for and where to look. Their LPD8 is okay at $49, giving you 8 buttons and just as many knobs, but if you can spring an extra $15 to $20, you can get the MPK Mini, which not only gives you 2 banks of 8 pads, but 25 keys, all of which are MIDI mappable, meaning instead of just 8 pads from the LPD8, you get 16 pads plus 25 keys with octave control for a whopping 41 potential buttons, excluding use of the octaves. Also keep an open eye for their MPD series, particularly on Craigslist. These range from just drum pads to adding a few knobs to full-fledged production tools, some even containing versions of Ableton Live. Korg's nanopad gives you 16 pads, but eschews any knobs for the sake of an XY touchpad. I prefer the security of a knob, but again, if this is more your style, you do get double the buttons of an LPD8 for about the same price. DJ Techtools from San Francisco creates a lovely MIDI fighter line, and their entry-level variation has evolved into their MIDI Fighter Spectra. This gives you 16 arcade buttons on top and 6 buttons, 3 on each side, that can send note information, CC messages, which is usually handled by a slider or a knob, or even banks, meaning in theory, you could have 6 banks of 16 buttons for a whopping 96 button opportunities. All this for $175, and you can pick out the color of your buttons, the top, and the casing. It is less buttons than you get elsewhere, but you're really getting your money's worth in the guarantee, customer service, and the customization from their hand-assembled craftsmanship. They also host their own mappings as well as mappings from other users, so if mine start to get a little stale for you, you can always check out their forums and mapping section. In addition, once you have a little bit more money to work with, their MIDI Fighter 3D takes this and expands it completely further. Novation, known for their Launchpad series, has a few other launch products as well. Their token Launchpad is by no means a bad entry, but it tends to have a specific workflow for Ableton Live and can be a bit intimidating at first glance. They also make the Launch Key, which is a bit like the MPK Mini and comes with as many buttons, knobs, and keys with octave control. They also make the Launch Control, which is 16 knobs and 8 buttons. A bit knob heavy, but if you know what you're doing and prefer that approach, this might be what you're looking for. A lesser-known Novation tool outside of their Launchpad lineup is the Nocturne, which, at $99 on Amazon, gets you 8 buttons, 9 knobs, a dedicated crossfader, about 4 toggling options, and some navigation for Ableton Live. While it's a bit Ableton-specific, it has obvious uses for Traktor as well, and might just be a fine first controller overall. QuNeo is a rare bird, a bit on the pricey end, going for nearly $200 brand new, but it's wildly expandable and extremely functional. In addition to being pressure sensitive on every functioning part of the controller, that's no exaggeration, every button, slider, and even turntable is pressure sensitive, meaning you can map things you'd normally map to knobs onto them. Each of these 16 MPD-like buttons can be broken down into 4 buttons of its own, creating 64 buttons for their Launchpad mode, as they call it, and that's saying nothing of its slew of customizable sliders. It has presets available for Traktor and Live, but also lends itself wonderfully for going on your own terms. Of course, if you have an iPad or iPod you're willing to loan to the cause, I'd be remiss to forget TouchOSC. This is an application in which you can literally design your own controller, which can send MIDI or OSC information. You can think of OSC a bit like MIDI evolved, which Traktor can receive. The overall cost for the app and program is less than $10 if memory serves me right, and has free editors on Windows and OS X. Lastly, I have a bit of a word for those of you who might already own a keyboard. The good news is, if it's MIDI, it's mappable. Traktor and Ableton Live both read MIDI messages, and anything that serves as a button can also be mapped to a key. So this right here could be your play button. So could this one. This could trigger an effect. This could be your crossfader. If it's MIDI, it's mappable in either program. So you might already have a controller laying around. Well, that about does it for my list of affordable controllers. Join me next week when I cover an 8-button, 4-knob, bare-bones setup that will get you performing in Ableton Live or Traktor. This is Odyssey of Odyssey Eurobeat signing out. See you next week.